Hello, my YouTube audience. Welcome back to the Crime Whisper. I know many of you enjoy listening to these stories as you drift off to sleep. So before we begin tonight's case, I'd love for you to take a moment, breathe deeply, get comfortable. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy in the world, leave me a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. And if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Helps us keep whispering these mysteries into the night. Alright, let's dim the lights, let the world grow quiet, and dive into tonight's story. A small town. A bright soul. Our story begins in the little community of St. Martin's, Missouri, nestled in Cole County. This was the kind of town where everyone seemed to know everyone. The population barely crossed 1,000, and neighbors still greeted each other by name, waved from their porches, and borrowed sugar without hesitation. It was quiet, safe for at least it was believed to be, and in this quiet corner of the Midwest lived a little girl named Elizabeth Olton, just 9 years old. She was the youngest of 3 children, living with her mother, Patty. Elizabeth was the sort of child who could light up an entire room simply by walking into it. She had a sweetness about her, a gentleness that made people feel at ease. Elizabeth adored theater. She had just been cast in her school's play, and she was beyond thrilled at home. She rehearsed her lines with anyone who would listen: siblings, cousins, friends. She would grab whoever happened to be nearby and press the script into their hands, insisting they read the other parts so she could practice her own. She loved to dress up, to perform, and to lose herself in song. Her favorites were Hannah Montana and Taylor Swift, and she would sing along endlessly, twirling in front of her mirror as if she were already on stage. She was vibrant, creative, and endlessly kind-hearted. Everyone who knew her said she cared deeply for others, always making sure her friends were included, always watching out for her siblings. But perhaps her strongest bond was with her mother, Patty. The two were inseparable. They baked together, played board games together, and solved puzzles late into the night. For Patty, Elizabeth was not just her youngest child, but also her little shadow, her partner in laughter and life. Life was simple, ordinary, and full of small-town warmth. But in the fall of 2009, that sense of comfort was about to be shattered forever. October 21, 2009. It was a Wednesday. Much like any other, the air carried that familiar crispness of October, when the days are shorter, the leaves crunch underfoot, and twilight comes quickly. Dinner was being prepared in the Olton household, and the children had settled into their after-school routines around that time. There came a knock at the door. It was Emma, one of Elizabeth's friends from down the street. She lived only a few houses away, and she and Elizabeth were often in and out of each other's homes, spending afternoons laughing and playing. Emma asked if Elizabeth could come outside to play. Patty hesitated. It was a school night, and dinner was almost ready. Elizabeth still had homework and responsibilities, but as soon as the little girl heard Emma at the door, she grew excited, begging her mother for permission. Both girls jumped up and down, pleading, their smiles irresistible. Patty finally relented. Just 1 hour, she said. Be home by 6. Elizabeth agreed immediately. She was always responsible, always conscientious. She promised her mother she'd be back on time, but as the clock struck 6, Elizabeth did not return. At first, Patty brushed it off. Children sometimes lose track of time, after all. But by 6:15, worry began to creep in for Elizabeth, who was usually punctual and cautious. This was unusual. Patty stepped outside, scanning the street. The daylight was fading quickly, shadows stretching across the yards. Her heart began to beat faster. Elizabeth was afraid of the dark. There was simply no way she would stay outside after sunset. Not willingly, Patty called her daughter's phone. It rang once, then went to voicemail. The pit in her stomach deepened. She quickly dialed Emma's grandmother, Karen, with whom Emma and her siblings lived. To Patty's horror, Karen told her she hadn't seen Elizabeth that afternoon. In fact, she hadn't even known Emma had gone to the Olton home to ask her to play. Patty's breath caught in her throat. She hung up and immediately called the police. Within half an hour, officers arrived at the house, ready to search. Flashlights cut through the darkness as neighbors began gathering in growing concern. Behind the homes stretched 60 acres of woods, dense, shadowed, and unsettling. If Elizabeth had wandered there, she could easily have gotten lost, but Patty insisted Elizabeth would never go into the woods alone. As the night deepened, the search widened. Patrol cars blocked roads, volunteers combed the underbrush, and voices called Elizabeth's name into the darkness. The little town, usually so quiet, was alive with panic by the time the search paused at midnight. The woods seemed to swallow every light. The town held its breath, waiting for dawn. The search narrows hours turned into days, an agonizing stretch of time. When a child is missing, search parties combed the woods relentlessly. Yet nothing surfaced. There were no discarded clothes, no shoe prints, no dropped phone, no trace of Elizabeth. Authorities had been hopeful when her cell phone pinged nearby. But just as they began closing in, the battery went dead. That one faint connection, the final digital thread to Elizabeth, was gone now. The forest itself loomed as both a mystery and a threat. The terrain was cruel. Uneven ground, thorny underbrush, damp soil that sucked at boots. Rain had left the air cold and the earth muddy, slowing the search. Volunteers grew weary, flashlights bobbing through the thickets, their breath clouding in the night air with every passing hour. The chance of finding Elizabeth safe seemed to slip further away. The sheriff announced to the public that the search was now focused on a narrowed section of the woods, determined by triangulating Elizabeth's last cell phone signals. But that reassurance rang hollow once the phone died. Elizabeth's family held on to hope. Though fear seeped into their words, her older sister's voice cracked as she pleaded, "I just want my little sister home safely." For the sheriff's office, Elizabeth was officially listed as an endangered missing person. The first break in the case, when detectives received Elizabeth's phone records. They combed through the call logs. Most were from her mother, Patty, and close family. Nothing unusual, but then came a curious entry. On the very day Elizabeth vanished, she had received a call from someone named Alyssa. At first, this detail didn't raise alarm, but soon another piece of the puzzle fell into place. 6-year-old Emma, Elizabeth's little friend, asked to speak to police again. This time, her story had changed. She seemed nervous, hesitant, her small voice carrying fear. She told investigators that it was not her idea to knock on Elizabeth's door that afternoon. It had been suggested by her half-sister, Alyssa Bustamante, who was 15 years old, explained that she and Elizabeth had gone outside to play. But not long after, Alyssa joined them almost immediately. Alyssa urged Emma to leave the two older girls alone. Elizabeth, ever responsible, soon said she needed to head home. She walked away right at the same time that her phone rang. The call, police realized, had been from Alyssa. Emma returned to her yard alone, continuing to play until she tripped and cut herself on a thorn bush. Crying out, she saw Alyssa appear suddenly, coming from her house to help. And that's when Emma noticed something unsettling. There seemed to be what looked like blood on Alyssa's clothing. This revelation sent a shiver through the investigation. If Emma was telling the truth, it meant she was not the last person to see Elizabeth alive. It was Alyssa's suspicion falls on Alyssa. Detectives quickly questioned the teenager. Alyssa appeared open and cooperative, answering questions without much hesitation, but seasoned investigators know when something doesn't sit right. The unease grew stronger as Emma's story replayed in their minds. 48 hours had now passed since Elizabeth's disappearance. The idea that she had simply wandered off or run away no longer held weight. The case was shifting, and detectives began to suspect that Elizabeth had been led somewhere or taken. While officers regrouped, volunteers searching deeper into the woods stumbled upon something chilling. A large hole, freshly dug, and then refilled. The discovery sent alarm bells ringing. Police rushed to the scene, only to find the soil empty beneath. No body, no belongings, just earth. Disturbed and ominous, yet the sight stuck with them because, when detectives recalled their earlier visit to the Bustamante home, something clicked in the backyard. They had noticed several holes, all strikingly similar in size and shape to the one now found in the woods with this eerie connection in mind. Investigators sought a warrant. They needed to search the Bustamante residence thoroughly after all. Elizabeth often visited the home even if she hadn't been there on that particular day. It was a place worth combing for evidence. A troubled room when officers entered the house. Most of the rooms appeared ordinary, but once they reached Alyssa's bedroom, a different picture emerged, one that was dark, chaotic, and deeply disturbing. The room was a mess, papers and clothes strewn about in disarray. The walls were marked with writings, some angry, some cryptic, and at least one scrawled in what appeared to be blood. Among the drawings was the outline of a human figure, labeled with the name Emma, Alyssa's little sister. Cards from her father, who was serving time in prison, were scattered across the floor, but the most chilling discovery was found buried beneath the clutter. Alyssa's personal diary. Inside, her words revealed a mind in turmoil. One entry read, "If I don't talk about it, I bottle it up, and when I explode, someone's going to die." As detectives turned the pages, they found more scribbled passages. Some had been violently scratched out in blue ink, as though Alyssa had tried to bury her own thoughts. Forensic specialists used lighting techniques to uncover what was hidden among the faded words. Two stood out clearly. Slit and throat. Alyssa had told police she was at school that day, but as the investigation deepened, her alibi unraveled. Attendance records showed she had skipped class. No one could confirm her whereabouts during the crucial hours. When Elizabeth disappeared, the pieces were falling into place, each one darker than the last. Alyssa Bustamante, only 15 years old, was no longer just a witness. She was becoming the prime suspect. The girl behind the mask. After Elizabeth's diary was seized by the FBI, it was handed over to Sergeant David Rice, the man tasked with the most difficult job of all, sitting face to face with a teenage suspect and carefully unraveling her secrets. Alyssa Bustamante was born in 1994 into a deeply troubled world. Both of her parents battled serious substance addictions. Her father spent much of her childhood in and out of prison, while her mother disappeared for days at a time on drug binges. For Alyssa and her siblings, home was a place of chaos, instability, and abandonment. Eventually, the children were placed with their grandparents, Karen and Gary, who fought for and gained full custody. Karen adored Alyssa. She did everything in her power to provide the children with love, stability, and the sense of normalcy they had lacked. She wanted them to feel safe, cared for, and rooted in something steady. But even with that love, Alyssa carried her scars. By her early teens, she was already showing troubling signs. She began self-harming, carving words into her own skin. She swallowed a dangerous overdose of pills, leading to a hospital admission. Doctors described her as angry and volatile. Her diagnosis was severe depression, and she was prescribed medication. Yet the downward spiral continued. On her social media pages, she began presenting a darker version of herself. She listed her hobbies as killing people and cutting. She spoke openly about wanting to know what it felt like to take someone's life. She confided in friends, and even her boyfriend, that she fantasized about burning down a house. While a family was trapped inside, her Twitter feed was filled with defiance, anger, and resentment of authority. In one post, she vented about people telling her what to do, her words laced with venom. On YouTube, she uploaded disturbing videos. One in particular showed her coaxing her two younger brothers toward a fence she knew was electrified, laughing at the thought of them getting shocked. The more investigators dug, the clearer the pattern became. Alyssa wasn't just struggling, she was dangerous. Her writings, her videos, her posts, everything pointed to someone consumed by violent thoughts, someone drawn to the idea of inflicting pain. And now, her diary, the one recovered from her chaotic room, seemed to confirm the darkest fears. Words of rage, violent sketches, and references to killing filled its pages. With this background in mind, Sergeant Rice knew his interview with Alyssa would be critical. He needed to break through her walls, carefully, methodically, and above all, he needed to find out what had happened to Elizabeth. The interview Begins Alyssa was brought in for a formal interview. Accompanied by her grandmother and a juvenile officer, Rice described his strategy. Ask a question, then wait through the silence. Sometimes for a full minute, the pauses were uncomfortable, heavy, but purposeful. He knew that silence can be louder than words, and eventually, people fill a tad first. Alyssa tried to recount her day casually. She claimed she came home from school around 3:30 p.m. and later went for a walk in the woods at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. She said she'd thought about bringing little Emma along, but found her annoying and left her behind. She described wandering the trails alone, eventually reaching a creek, where she lingered before returning home. She said it was about an hour-long walk by the time she got back. According to her story, her family was preparing to head to church, returning later that evening, around 8 o'clock p.m. BUT. Her calm recital was already unraveling. Investigators knew she hadn't been at school that day. She was lying and doing so with unsettling. Sergeant Rice pressed further. He slid a printed map across the table, asking her to trace her steps. Alyssa leaned over the paper, pointing casually. Do you want me to draw this for you? Rice asked gently. I have a map now. I don't think it has your actual house on it, but the way I understand it, your new house is about here, right? She nodded, guiding her finger along the trails. I just kept following the path. She explained. It goes this way, then there's a pasture. I hung out at the creek, then I came back. How long were you gone? Rice asked. About an hour, Alyssa replied. Almost mechanically, her story seemed rehearsed, but the cracks were showing the holes in the ground. Then Rice shifted the focus. He brought up the holes, the strange pits discovered both in the woods and in her backyard. Alyssa's demeanor didn't falter. She admitted openly that she had dug them, but she brushed it off casually. I just like digging holes, she said. Sometimes, she explained, she buried dead animals in them, but Rice wasn't convinced. The holes weren't random, nor playful. They were precise, deliberately sized. Volunteers had already stumbled across one in the woods, refilled with earth. Detectives had noticed several more on her family's property. The connection was impossible to ignore. Staring across the table at this calm 15-year-old girl, Sergeant Rice knew they were inching closer to the truth. But the truth, when it finally surfaced, would be far darker than anyone in that quiet town could have imagined. They began by questioning Alyssa about the holes she was known to dig in the woods. At first, she brushed it off, claiming they were nothing more than shallow pits, places where she once buried shoeboxes. But investigators pointed out the larger, deeper craters they'd nearly stumbled into on horseback, the kind of holes too dangerous to ignore when pressed on what kind of person could harm a 9-year-old girl. Alyssa shrugged and coldly replied, a sick person, someone who could set aside all their morals. She insisted she'd never been alone with Elizabeth and claimed she had helped search for her, even speculating aloud that the girl had probably been kidnapped. But Rice, the interrogator, wasn't buying it. He presented phone data, placing Elizabeth's device directly behind Alyssa's home, and pushed further, asking about the FBI search of her bedroom. Alyssa admitted they'd taken sheets, clothing, and her diary, though she seemed reluctant to dwell on it. When Rice confronted her about the scribbled-out diary entry, the walls began to crumble. He reminded her that erasing words on paper didn't make them vanish. The truth always lingered. Finally, Alyssa muttered a version of events. Elizabeth had fallen, hit her head, and died by accident. Panicked, she burned the body, but Rice knew better. The diary entry recovered by investigators revealed the chilling truth in Alyssa's own words. I just killed someone. I strangled them, slit their throat, and stabbed them. Now they're dead. It was amazing. Pushed harder, Alyssa admitted what really happened. Armed with a kitchen knife, she lured Elizabeth deep into the woods under the pretense of showing her something. After walking 15 minutes into the forest, she attacked, beating, strangling, then slashing her throat before stabbing her repeatedly. Terrified and helpless, Elizabeth's final moments were swallowed by the dark woods. Alyssa confessed she had tried to burn the body, and when that failed, She began digging a grave near the creek. Elisa claimed she buried Elizabeth and tossed everything else into the creek, but Rice knew better. The hole hadn't been dug. That date was prepared days earlier, just like the others investigators had found scattered in the woods. Alyssa hadn't carried a shovel that night, and there was no way she could have killed Elizabeth, dug a grave, and returned home in time to go to church. If he could get her to admit to digging the grave in advance, it would prove premeditation. Still, many struggled to believe Alyssa had acted alone, yet she swore that no one else was involved. Eventually, she agreed to lead Rice to the body just 15 minutes from her home. The search for Elizabeth Olton came to a devastating end the very next day. Police announced the arrest of the 15-year-old girl. She was charged with first-degree murder. The news horrified the small neighborhood. Court officials confirmed they were seeking to try her as an adult. Beginning with a closed detention hearing, a certification hearing was scheduled for November 8th, where the court would weigh her age, maturity, and level of sophistication before deciding her fate. Though officials initially withheld her name, the community didn't need it. With only 6 houses on the street, everyone already knew. Investigators even questioned Alyssa's boyfriend. Pushing him through a polygraph, he denied involvement, and in the end, police cleared him, though they believed he may have suspected something. What was undeniable, however, was the chilling diary entry. Alyssa had admitted she wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone in the weeks before the murder. She had dug not 1, but 2 graves. Elizabeth was lured to one. The second grave's purpose was never confirmed, but detectives suspected Alyssa had been planning to kill her 2 younger brothers. On October 28, a week after she vanished, Elizabeth Olton was laid to rest. Her favorite color was pink, and the funeral reflected that: pink flowers, pink ribbons, and a pink hand-white casket carried by a horse-drawn carriage. The community filled the church and lined the streets. Even emergency responders and investigators who had searched for her sat quietly in the front rows. Her father wept as he spoke of her life: Barbie dolls, bike rides, and a room filled with pink. She was my bug, my heart, he said every night. I tell her I love her. I tell her I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect her. His grief echoed through the town in November 2009. Despite her lawyers pushing for a reduced charge on the grounds of her troubled childhood and young age, the defense pushed to keep Alyssa Bustamante in juvenile court, but the judge ruled otherwise. She would be tried as an adult on first-degree murder charges. Indicted, Alyssa entered a plea of not guilty, and trial preparations began for Elizabeth's family. It felt like justice was finally moving forward, but in June 2011, a devastating blow struck. Alyssa's defense team argued that her confession to Sergeant Rice had been improperly obtained. A judge agreed, ruling that because of her age and the involvement of a juvenile officer, parts of her statement would not be admissible. The trial was delayed until early 2012. The prosecution, suddenly facing an uphill battle, offered Alyssa a plea deal: second-degree murder instead of first. In exchange, she withdrew her not guilty plea and admitted to the killing. This spared her from the possibility of the death penalty. The courtroom was packed as Alyssa calmly recounted, in chilling detail, what she had done. Reporters described the silence as suffocating. Her defense leaned on her unstable upbringing, mental health struggles, and the claim that her prescribed medication made her more prone to violence. Despite these arguments, Alyssa Bustamante was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder and 30 years for armed criminal action, to be served consecutively months later. The Supreme Court ruled that juveniles cannot receive mandatory life sentences without parole, giving Alyssa the chance to seek parole after 30 years. During sentencing, Patty, Elizabeth's mother, spoke through tears. Shaking so violently, the judge asked her to stop. Alyssa's only words were, "I cannot even understand what you're going through. I would give my life to bring Elizabeth back." Detectives later said that in that moment, when Karen and Gary, the only 2 who had stood by her, walked out of court, Alyssa realized she was utterly alone. Patty called Alyssa's words lies, Crafted by her lawyers, prosecutor Mark Richardson described the case as the most senseless, reprehensible motive he had ever seen. A child's life taken for a thrill, a forensic psychologist agreed, warning that Alyssa's behavior patterns made the killing inevitable. Patty went on to sue Alyssa and the hospital where she had once sought treatment, arguing the system should have seen the danger signs. The case against the hospital was dismissed, but the lawsuit against Alyssa succeeded, her owing Elizabeth's family $5 million. In 2014, Alyssa appealed her sentence. It was denied. The events of October 21, 2009 shattered an entire community. Patty remembers her daughter's kindness, her role in the school play, her laughter with friends, her love for life's simple joys. Elizabeth's future was stolen in the most terrifying way imaginable, leaving scars that will never fade. The 911 caller was 19-year-old Noema Alaves Perez. Her voice was shaking as she told dispatchers her 5-year-old daughter, Dulce Maria Alaves, had vanished from a park. Police rushed to the scene, setting in motion one of the most baffling missing child cases in recent memory. Dulce was born in April 2014. Her mother, Noema, was only 14 at the time. So much of the caregiving fell to Noema's own mother, Norma, who eventually became Dulce's legal guardian. Dulce grew up in a close family, though her father, Edgar Perez, was deported to Mexico in 2018. She was known as a spunky, affectionate little girl who loved Disney's Frozen and dreamed of being a princess. By 2019, Noema had a young son, Manny, and was pregnant with her third child on September 16, 2019. The routine of the day shifted into tragedy. That afternoon, Noema waited at her mother's house for her children to come home from school. Dulce had just started kindergarten, still adjusting to her new routine when the school bus dropped her off. Noema, Dulce, 3-year-old Manny, and Noema's younger sister decided to stop at a gas station for ice cream before heading to Bridgeton City. Park CCTV footage later confirmed their stop. Dulce was seen wearing white pants decorated with butterflies and flowers, white sandals, and a yellow shirt with a koala on it. From there, they drove just 5 minutes to the park. Pulling into a space near the basketball courts, Dulce and Manny hopped out and ran toward the playground swings. About 30 yards away. Normally, Noema would join them often, bringing the family dog, but this time she stayed in the car. 5 months pregnant, she sat with her younger sister, who was working on homework, and scratched a lottery ticket. Although they could see the playground, the swings were hidden by a hill. What happened next remains clouded in confusion. Around 4:20 p.m., reports suggest Manny returned to the car without Dulce, but Noema later disputed this, insisting that neither child came back. She said she lost sight of them both, so she and her sister got out to look. They eventually found Manny, crying. His ice cream dropped in the dirt. When she asked where Dulce was, he pointed toward the buildings by the park. At first, Noema assumed Dulce was playing hide-and-seek. She called her brother, who lived nearby, and asked him to bring the dog to help search, but there was no sign of Dulce. She questioned children at the basketball courts, and their stories only deepened the mystery. One child claimed Dulce had been seen running toward the buildings, with an African-American man walking nearby. Another witness recalled spotting a red van and a Hispanic man. In Noema herself remembered 2 children in the park around the same age as her kids, walking hand in hand without any adult nearby. Moments later, she finally dialed police. We were in the car. She came down with my son, and they ran to the park. Then, me and my sister came down, but when we got there, she wasn't there. My son was just crying with his ice cream on the ground. They said someone threw it, and my daughter just ran away when asked if she saw anyone else around her daughter that day. Noema could only answer, "No, not that I know of, just other people in the park saying different things." Witnesses claimed they saw Dulce running through the back of some houses, chased by 2 men, one described as black, the other Hispanic. One child said the men had taken his ice cream, thrown it on the ground, and then left with Dulce. Her mother was at the basketball court with her son. When he returned crying, he had been left standing there alone, his ice cream ruined. and his sister gone within minutes. Police arrived. Bloodhounds were brought in to scour the vast park and wooded areas, clinging to the hope that Dulcie had simply wandered off, but the task was enormous. Bridgeton City Park stretches across nearly 1,000 acres, tucked behind Bridgeton High School. In that narrow window of time, Police Chief Michael Gamery SR revealed that as many as 400 vehicles had come and gone near the park. No cameras covered the playground itself, though nearby footage confirmed Dulcie had been there before, vanishing by then. At least 45 minutes had passed, widening the search and the sense of dread. The FBI's child abduction rapid deployment teams soon joined local law enforcement volunteers from the community poured in to help, using their knowledge of the area to search every corner. But with so many people rushing in, potential evidence, footprints, tire tracks may have been trampled or lost forever. The following day, September 17th, investigators released a description of a vehicle, a red van with sliding doors and tinted windows. The tip came from a child, leaving room for uncertainty, but it was the first real lead. By nightfall, 28 hours after Dulcie had disappeared, an Amber Alert was issued. Her name, description, and the suspect vehicle were blasted across phones and news stations. The community was shaken. Strangers who had never met Dulcie felt the pain as if it were their own child. "It makes me sick," one said. "My stomach's in knots. I just keep praying she comes home safe." The case drew headlines across South Jersey. Eyewitness News reported that after re-interviewing witnesses, police now firmly believed Dulcie had been abducted from the playground and forced into that red van. Her mother made a desperate plea on camera, her voice trembling. "I just want to find her. I just want to know she's okay, that nothing bad has happened to her." Witnesses said Dulcie was forced into the back seat of a vehicle, then driven away. Her disappearance ignited an all-out search that stretched through 2 days, 2 nights, and now into the third. The community stepped forward in force, but experts raised questions. Former FBI Special Agent J.J. Claver criticized the delay, saying an Amber Alert should have been issued within hours, not the following day, because Bridgeton City Park was a well-trafficked place where people jogged and exercised. Investigators believed the abductor had to be familiar with the area, someone who knew how to move without being seen. FBI Special Agent Daniel Garabrant echoed that theory. The person that did this likely lived in Bridgeton, or at least had reason to be there that day. "We believe there are witnesses who saw something, saw the abductor, saw the vehicle, but, for whatever reason, have not yet come forward." Detectives faced another problem almost immediately: the wildfire spread of rumors on social media. Hurtful speculation trickled back to Dulcie's family, intensifying their pain. Her aunt, Niver Alvis, defended Dulcie's mother against online accusations. "They're saying she had something to do with it, but they're not police. They can't judge her. They don't know." Authorities confirmed they were in constant contact with Dulcie's mother, Noema, and were conducting follow-up interviews with relatives at the same time. They monitored social media chatter, noting that every comment, even online, could hold a clue. Meanwhile, the Alves family gathered their resources, pooling money to offer a reward in the desperate hope that someone might come forward. Online groups sprang up, dedicated to spreading news about Dulcie's disappearance. Volunteers joined searches, many live streaming their efforts on Facebook to rally awareness. On September 18th, a vigil was held as the sun sank over Bridgeton. Hundreds gathered, family, police, and strangers united in grief. Many wore yellow, the same color as the shirt Dulce had been wearing when she vanished 5 days earlier. Her uncle spoke with Action News. His words translated: "There's an emptiness at home since she hasn't come back. She never hurt anyone. She's just an innocent child who likes to play. We don't know why this happened." Through tears, Dulcie's grandmother pleaded, "I beg you, if you know something, call the police. You don't understand what you're doing to us." "I don't understand why this is happening." When asked about Dulcie's mother, she broke down, whispering only, "I can't speak. I'm sorry." The family's hope was raw, desperate. Fight your way home, we want her safe. Please, please, her uncle begged that night. The vigil ended with candles glowing in the darkness. An Amber Alert still remained active. Dulcie's mother did not speak. She was escorted quietly by law enforcement. The reward for information leading to her safe return had already grown to $35,000 within days. Dive teams searched nearby waters, land and air searches expanded. Bloodhounds tracked a scent for nearly an hour before it vanished into nothing by Saturday. The case intensified. 3 new witnesses, 2 women, and a young boy came forward. Investigators led them back to the playground, the very spot where Dulcie Maria Alves was last seen. Oliva, 3-year-old Manny, Dulcie's younger brother, may have been the only witness to what happened that day. The FBI brought him back to the park, hoping he could reveal anything about what he had seen, but Manny barely spoke, and the effort led nowhere. Police continued to stress that Dulcie's family was fully cooperating. Her grandmother plastered missing flyers across town, while authorities intensified their search. More than 300 officers were deployed, over 500 vehicles were checked, more than 200 locations searched, and local sex offenders were tracked down and accounted for. Still, the community buzzed with rumors. Some even claimed Dulcie's mother had been arrested at a press conference. The police chief addressed this directly. I want to clarify, reports that the victim's mother was arrested are completely false. In fact, that claim itself is under investigation. I urge everyone to avoid jumping to conclusions or spreading misinformation. We have no strong suspects at this time, but we've already conducted over 70 interviews and continue to follow every lead for Bridgeton residents. Fear grew heavy. Parents clutched their children tighter, scanning every corner of the park. One local admitted, "Everybody is worried about their own family. It's pretty scary," another said. "Even when we're here with our kids, we can't relax. We're always watching, always making sure they don't wander away." A week passed. Investigators issued a new plea. Anyone who had been in the park that day, anyone with photos or videos, should come forward. Perhaps a small detail, even in the background, might hold the answer. But a deeper challenge emerged. Bridgeton has a large undocumented immigrant community, and many feared that coming forward could endanger their immigration status. Despite repeated assurances that information could be shared without risk, trust was difficult to build. Cadia Ramirez, who works closely with migrants, explained, "They're afraid it's a trap. The police chief has said they're not working with ICE, but convincing people of that is another matter. It comes down to trust." On September 24th, investigators announced they had contacted Dulcie's father in Mexico, hoping he could offer insight into why someone might take his daughter 2 weeks after the disappearance. Dulcie's mother faced the cameras in a trembling plea. "Today marks 2 weeks since the monster took my daughter. My life has changed for the worse. People accuse me of being involved, of saying terrible things about me. Please stop the rumors. Please stop pointing fingers when we don't know who took her. I want to thank law enforcement, the media, and everyone who has prayed and searched for my Dulcie. Please don't give up. Keep sharing her photos. Keep passing out flyers. And if you were in the park that day, check your phone. Check your phone. Any little detail could help." When asked what she might have done differently that afternoon, she admitted, "I don't go out much, and now I'm scared. I'm scared of what people say, of the rumors. I just don't know what happened to my daughter." Questions about her son Manny surfaced as well. A reporter pressed, "What did Manny say to you when he came back from the playground?" She answered quietly, "He didn't run back to the car. He was just standing there, crying. He doesn't talk. He doesn't talk." Noma recalled how her young son had been crying that day. When she asked him, "Where's your sister?" he couldn't answered. He still couldn't speak, but simply pointed toward the buildings. His ice cream, she noted, had already melted onto the door. As for Dulcie's treat, Noma explained that her daughter had chosen coconut ice in a cup, but investigators never recovered the cup or the spoon. "Whoever took her," she said with a nervous laugh. They took the ice cream to Noma, was also questioned about the rumors swirling around town, rumors that cast suspicion directly on her when asked how she responded to those who claimed her family knew more than they admitted. Noma insisted, "No. I don't know what happened." She pushed back against accusations about her parenting, saying people judged her based on her past mistakes. She explained that, since learning she was pregnant, she had distanced herself from her old friends, focusing instead on her children. Dulcie, she said, often called her late at night, crying and begging to come home still. Speculation persisted. Online commenters accused Noma of selling her daughter, of harming her, of covering up the truth. The weight of those words cut deep. That really affected me. She admitted, "I've seen cases where mothers do that. But I love my daughter." She knows that some people found her calm demeanor suspicious. But Noma explained, she simply didn't cry in front of others. Not even her own parents. Her phone was taken multiple times by authorities to be combed for clues. Meanwhile, the reward for information grew to $40,000 in early October. Noma and her mother gave an interview to NJCOM, where she revealed police had promised not to give up. She described how the disappearance had also changed her son. Manny, he had grown more aggressive, stopped listening, and was no longer the same child he once was. Noma spoke of wanting to hire a private detective, but the cost was impossible for her family. She even wished other states could join the search, but admitted she didn't know how to make that happen. Investigators ruled out Dulcie's father, Edgar, after the FBI questioned him then. On October 15th, police released a sketch of a man they wanted to talk to. Slender, possibly Hispanic, between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 8, around 30 to 35 years old. With facial acne, he had been seen in a black shirt, red pants, orange sneakers, and a baseball cap. Police chief Gamari confirmed that several men resembling the sketch had been questioned, but later released. Authorities urged the public to watch for unusual behavior, people who suddenly stopped showing up to work, changed vehicles, or altered their appearance. Prosecutor Jennifer Wed-McCrae even asked the public to look for families who suddenly had a child in the 5 to 6 age range, urging anyone suspicious to call the FBI. Tip line: the case drew nationwide attention. The country is on alert. Chief Gamari said, "I can't even tell you a single state we haven't received a tip from." In December 2019, the case reached an even larger audience when Dr. Phil featured it on his show. During the interview, he pressed Noma on whether Dulcie might have known her abductor. Noma shook her head. She didn't believe that was the case at first, and May seemed unsure. Dr. Phil pressed her on who might be responsible, and eventually she brought up an old acquaintance, a man who had confronted her several times before her daughter disappeared. She recalled, "Last time he saw me with my daughter, he just waved and said hi. He asked if that was my daughter, and I said yes." She explained that he had tried to date her in the past, but she rejected his advances later. Speaking to Action News, M.A. clarified that he was among the last people to see her daughter, but she did not truly suspect him. She insisted she was simply answering Dr. Phil's questions. During the interview, she revealed that police had asked her to take a polygraph test. She complied, but was never told the results. Her calm demeanor drew scrutiny from many viewers. Though Dr. Phil noted her first language is Spanish when she spoke directly to her missing daughter in Spanish, the emotion was raw and unmistakable through tears. She admitted she felt she had failed her child, and promised that if Dulcie were found, she would beg her forgiveness. Former family spokesperson Jackie Rodriguez also appeared on the episode. She confessed she found NMA's calmness unsettling. "She knows that child is okay. She's missing her. But I think she knows the child is okay," Rodriguez remarked. She also admitted she had never known in May before Dulcie's disappearance, and had only ever seen her cry once by the end of the broadcast. Dr. Phil himself pledged to add to the growing reward fund, raising the total to $75,000. Meanwhile, the case was sparking community action petitions, demanding cameras in Bridgeton City Park had gathered nearly 2,000 signatures, but just as momentum was building, the world shut down in March 2020. COVID-19 struck, halting normal investigative Work face-to-face briefings ended, courts closed, travel across state lines became nearly impossible. Tips kept coming, some from psychics. One claimed Dulcie had told them from beyond that she was buried in a shallow grave near her school. Former FBI agent J.J. Claver dismissed such claims outright, stressing that law enforcement would never put stock in psychic information. Yet among the thousands of tips, 3 stood out. 3 cryptic letters found in Ohio, one at a library, one at an ice cream shop, and one at a racetrack and casino. One letter had been mailed, another left inside a mailbox, and a third scrawled on an index card doll appeared to come from the same hand. One 2-page letter even referenced Dulcie's case and her mother's, Dr. Phil, appearance, but every detail could easily have been pulled from the internet. Postmarks led investigators in circles. One came from Cleveland, another from Weatherfield Township. A zip code linked to Mexico surfaced, but no one could prove where the letters truly originated. The most chilling note found at the racetrack read in part, "Look for Dulcie Olivet, age 5, kidnapped from Bridgeton, New Jersey. Dr. Phil, truck stop, dead-end street entrance, woods. Please look." Investigators swept 40 acres near the racetrack with cadaver dogs and infrared scanners, but nothing surfaced. The letters were sent back to New Jersey authorities for deeper analysis. Police Chief Michael Gamery made his position clear. "We are investigating to see if we can determine the source. If it doesn't come back as related, we want to know that, and if this is a hoax, we want whoever is behind it prosecuted for distributing false information." Even Jackie Rodriguez, no longer serving as spokesperson, revealed she had personally received one of these strange letters. In March, detectives received strange, anonymous letters scribbled on scraps of paper with cryptic words like 1776 campground and Mexico. One detail immediately stood out. None of the envelopes carried an address. They had simply been sent in, as if from nowhere. Even years later, Police Chief Michael Gamery's remained convinced the community was withholding information. "We firmly believe there are people out there with knowledge they have not shared with us," he said on the 1-year anniversary of Dulcie's disappearance that same day. Dulcie's mother gave a rare interview. The Cumberland County prosecutor, Jennifer Webb McRae, echoed her words with a fragile thread of hope. Without clear evidence that Dulcie had died, authorities would continue to believe she might still be alive. It was around this time that local law enforcement reached out again to Dulcie's father, Edgar. His voice resurfaced after a video appeared on YouTube, posted on what should have been Dulcie's birthday. The camera opened on a man speaking softly, his face weighed down with grief. "Hello, everyone, my name is Edgar Perez," he began. "On that Sunday, his daughter would have turned 7. I'm really sad and hurt. I don't know if my baby girl is okay," he confessed, who had been deported from the United States in late 2018, just months before his daughter vanished, had not seen Dulcie in the time leading up to her disappearance. Yet he insisted that he had always been part of her life. "For those who think I took my baby girl, let me tell you, I don't know where she is. Just like everyone else, I wouldn't know where to look." 2 years after the abduction, the community held a silent walk. Family, neighbors, and strangers marched together, refusing to let her memory fade. "We're not going to give up," one organizer said. "We'll keep going out there. We'll keep searching." That year, investigators released an age-progressed image of Dulcie, showing what she might look like at 7 years old. They prayed the picture would stir someone's memory, trigger recognition, and bring new leads. At another vigil, the community gathered to light candles. "We light her way home," one woman explained. "Maybe it will spark someone's memory. Maybe it will push someone to finally come forward." But the years dragged on. By the 3rd anniversary of Dulcie's disappearance, another age-progressed image was published by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Another vigil was held at the same park where she had vanished without a trace. Chief Gamery revealed that new tips were still arriving. Even an anonymous message had come in just days earlier. About a dozen different agencies remained involved in the case. Still, he stressed that the missing piece of the puzzle might lie with someone in the community. Their information no matter how small, could finally tell us what happened to her. He said the vigils continued, year after year. Mothers wept openly, clutching candles. Dulcia's mother and grandmother sobbed quietly in the crowd, their grief raw. "She's my whole world." Her mother whispered, "We miss her so much, we just want her to come home." Organizers made a promise. Until Dulcie was found, they would return every year to the park on the anniversary of her disappearance. They would not let her name fade away on what would have been Dulcie's 8th birthday. The community gathered again. People spoke her name, sang for her, and prayed. Detectives continued their work, chasing leads in both the United States and Mexico, following every possible line of inquiry inside the family's home. Time seemed frozen. Dulcie's favorite toys and dresses remained untouched. Her tiny backpack still rested in the same spot, filled with her school papers from her last day of kindergarten. "We haven't given anything away," her mother explained. "Her dresses, her shoes, her toys, they're all here. They're waiting for her." The family has never left that home. They still believe one day the door will open and Dulcie will walk back inside. If you have any information about the disappearance or whereabouts of Dulcie Maria Alavas, you are urged to contact the Bridgeton Police Department, or the FBI. Spanish speakers may also call a dedicated hotline. You can also reach out to the New Jersey State Police. The case remains open. The hope remains alive. This case takes us to the scenic city of Bend, Oregon, nestled along the Deschutes River. It was home to 23-year-old Kay Sawyer, who lived with her boyfriend of 2 years. Cameron Kay worked as a dental assistant while studying at Central Oregon Community College. Creative and athletic, she loved photography, poetry, drawing, and a wide range of outdoor sports: snowboarding, golfing, fishing, and wakeboarding. Friends and family described her as one of the happiest people they knew, always smiling, always social, and always making strangers feel like friends. On the evening of July 23, 2016, Kay joined a group of friends to celebrate a bachelorette party after parking her car at a friend's house. She and the group headed downtown, where they spent hours bar hopping, dancing, and drinking. At one point, Kay danced with another man at the bar, a moment witnessed by one of Cameron's friends, who quickly texted him about it. By just after midnight, the party was winding down. Kay, now heavily intoxicated, called Cameron for a ride home. On the way, she texted Cameron's friend, apologizing if the dancing had looked inappropriate. But when Cameron arrived, tensions immediately flared. The two argued throughout the ride, and when they reached their apartment complex, Cameron stormed inside while Kay remained in the car, crying and asking for space. 10 minutes later, Cameron returned to coax her in, but the passenger door was wide open. Kay was gone. Panicked, Cameron began searching the area, sending her desperate texts. "Where are you? Please just come home. I don't want to play this game. I'll start searching, but please help me out." Kay's replies were cryptic and emotional. "My phone's about to die." Then another, "Are you kidding? Because that's goodbye." Moments later, her phone went dark. Cameron drove the streets looking for her. He checked a friend's house, hoping she had walked there, but she hadn't. Calls from Kay's mother, Julie, and other friends also went unanswered as hours passed. The hope that Kay had simply gone to cool off began to fade. Finally, Cameron called police. "Last night, I got home from the bars with my girlfriend. She got upset and ran off. I chased her, but couldn't find her. Her phone's off. I've called her family. Nobody's heard from her. What should I do?" Dispatch asked where she was last seen. Cameron explained, "At our apartment complex. Around 1 a.m. She was mad, so I went inside and told her to come in. When she calmed down, when I went back out 10 minutes later, she was gone." She texted me, saying she was walking down the street, and then she just stopped responding. Kay Sawyer had vanished into the night. Her phone was about to die, and after that, no one could reach her. She vanished on foot. Kay Sawyer, her boyfriend, told police KY she had her phone, but it's been dead all day. I thought she'd charge it. Her car's still parked at her friend's house. I checked, her friend hasn't heard from her either. Kay's father and mother confirmed the same. No one had seen her. No calls, no trace word. spread quickly. Her name lit up social media, and soon hundreds of volunteers began scouring Central Oregon. Flyers plastered the town. Her photo shared thousands of times. Detectives interviewed Cameron, her boyfriend, but ruled him out immediately. They questioned her friends, but they couldn't help either. Their only other light, a man she'd briefly danced with at the bar. He told investigators he was shocked to hear she was missing. They'd only shared a few minutes together before she returned to her friends and left. He never saw her again. The community was on edge. Kay, just 23 years old, was last seen in the early hours of Sunday, near her West Bend apartment, walking toward Central Oregon Community College. Her mother described her as deeply connected to her family. She never went silent for days. Something was terribly wrong. Her 4 younger brothers waited desperately for their big sister to come home. Volunteers blanketed the town with flyers, while her mother, Julie, clung to a dreadful intuition the moment she heard Kay was missing. She felt it deep inside. Her daughter was already gone. Detectives tried tracking her phone, but the pings came from random spots across Bend. It wasn't her. The signals came from an old iPhone still tied to her Apple ID. By Monday morning, Kay missed her shift at the dental clinic. Police escalated her case, officially listing her as an endangered missing person. Then came the break. Officer Isabel Lara stepped forward with a chilling report about her own husband. She confessed he had been acting strangely since late Sunday night, saying things that disturbed her to the core. Her husband was 31-year-old Edwin Lara, a campus security guard at the local college. She recalled that after his graveyard shift on Saturday, he came home unusually late on Sunday morning. He was quiet, withdrawn. He didn't hold her hand at church like he normally would. He just sat in silence, his mind clearly elsewhere. Something about him had shifted, and Isabel was beginning to fear the reason why Edwin had been acting strangely for days. His girlfriend? Isabel first noticed it at church that Sunday morning. He was quiet, distracted, almost hollow. When she asked what was wrong, he brushed her off, saying only that he was fine. They went to watch a movie afterward, but his unusual behavior continued well into the night. By Monday morning, Isabel could no longer ignore it. She pressed him for answers. Edwin finally sat down on the sofa, pacing back and forth, before blurting out words she could barely process. "I killed a woman at first." Isabel thought he was talking about an accident. Maybe he had hit someone with his car. But as she tried to make sense of his story, his words became darker and more confusing. He admitted to panicking, to hiding evidence, to doing things that didn't add up. Isabel asked what he meant, what he had done with the body, but his answers remained scattered. Then Edwin revealed that some of the victims' belongings were hidden in their shed. When Isabel went to check, she was horrified. Inside, police would later find Kayle's purse, and idea her shoes, a blood-stained rock, and a clump of hair. This was no accident. It was brutal. It was homicide. By the time investigators pieced it together, Edwin was already gone. He had fled the house, armed with Isabel's gun, and was now on the run. What followed was a terrifying interstate crime. Speedwin abandoned his car at his parents' home, then spotted a 19-year-old woman named Andrea sitting in her car after a long shift. He forced his way inside at gunpoint and ordered her to drive for the next 3 hours. Andrea was trapped with him, listening as he rambled about the case and showed her photos of himself in his campus security uniform. Eventually, Edwin made her stop at a motel. He checked in under the pretense that Andrea was his girlfriend, but once inside the room, his true intentions became clear. He handcuffed her to the bathroom door while he showered, then demanded that she strip and shower in front of him. Andrea refused, resisting him at every step. Furious, Edwin cuffed her to the bed and ordered her to take sleeping pills, but Andrea was smart. When her phone alarm rang, she seized the chance to save herself. Thinking quickly, she lied, telling Edwin the alarm was to remind her to take medication for an STD. The lie worked. Edwin, paranoid and unsettled, decided against touching her. Around 1:30 a.m., he dragged Andrea back into the car and continued his desperate flight. At dawn, he attempted to carjack a 73-year-old man, shooting him in the stomach. When the man resisted miraculously, the victim survived. Still frantic, Edwin fled with Andrea to a gas station, where he carjacked a 76-year-old woman and her 2 teenage grandsons. He forced one of the boys to drive at gunpoint before finally letting the family go, thankfully. They were unharmed. Now with a new vehicle, Edwin ordered Andrea to drive toward California, where he claimed he had relatives on the way. He used Andrea's phone to record a chilling video in it. He apologized for that girl in Oregon, admitted to killing her, and expressed regret, but insisted Andrea would survive, so long as she obeyed him. Edwin's spree came to an end early that morning at 6:40 a.m. He made the call no one expected. He dialed 911 himself. "I'm the guy on Interstate. I know you've got the chopper on me." He told the dispatcher, "I'm wanted for murder in Oregon. I want to turn myself in." He admitted to having someone with him, a young woman named Andrea. Innocent and terrified, Edwin's voice was calm, almost eerily measured. As he explained the situation, he asked officers not to be too rough, citing his asthma, and assured them he would cooperate. So long as Andrea remained unharmed, the California Highway Patrol soon spotted the speeding car and attempted to pull him over. The chase reached speeds of over 100 miles per hour, but eventually, officers were able to stop him before being taken into custody. Edwin recorded a final chilling message to the family of Kay. "I'm sorry," he said. "I will tell you where the body is in time." Andrea, initially detained, was quickly recognized as another innocent victim and released. Edwin, however, maintained the story he had told Isabel, that he had accidentally hit Kay with his car. He claimed panic had driven him further, even strangling her when she screamed. The narrative made little sense, yet it revealed the violent reality behind the disappearance. Investigators pressed him for details about the body. Edwin insisted he would reveal the location, but even as he spoke, his account remained disjointed and horrifying. He described the moments leading up to the incident in fragmented sentences, blaming haste and poor judgment. Officers listened closely, trying to piece together the sequence, knowing every detail could bring them closer to justice or uncover further darkness. Edwin's confession revealed the horrifying truth. He claimed that the initial contact had been an accidental bump with his patrol car, but what began as a mistake quickly escalated. Kay had been drunk and frightened, and when she screamed, Edwin panicked. In his account, he admitted to forcibly removing her belongings, throwing her into a ditch, and planning to move her elsewhere. Detectives, aware of Edwin's strong religious beliefs, encouraged him to come clean, appealing to his faith in the idea of repenting to God. It was this approach that finally broke through, prompting Edwin to disclose the full extent of his actions. The interrogation revealed the chilling reality. The moment he closed the car door, he had already decided that Kay would not escape. Officers pressed him, pointing out that the very act of taking her phone and purse indicated premeditation. Edwin ultimately admitted that silencing her meant killing her. He claimed the decision came when she began screaming, but investigators noted that by then, he had already taken steps to prevent her from calling for help. After leaving Cameron's car, Kay had been walking alone at night, likely expecting a safe ride from a campus security officer. When Edwin offered her a lift, she unknowingly stepped into a deadly trap. Once inside his patrol car, the doors were locked from the outside, leaving her entirely helpless. According to his confession, he attempted to sexually assault her. When she resisted, he strangled her into unconsciousness, drove several miles out, and struck her head with a rock. He admitted to multiple acts of violence, and the details of whether she was still alive during parts of the attack remain unknown. Edwin returned to the campus, changed vehicles, and attempted to cover his tracks. Investigators later recovered the first patrol car he had driven during his flight, discovering handwritten notes inside. One read, "The place I killed her is on the B12 lot runner over on College." Another simply said, "This note is to say that I am sorry for taking her life eventually." Near a canyon off Highway 126, police located the body of Kay Sawyer, confirming the worst fears of her family and community. Tragic end to a young life full of promise. Authorities confirmed that the body found was, indeed, Kay Sawyer's. and Edwin Lara was arrested in connection with her murder. Lara, a 31-year-old Redmond resident, worked part-time as a campus public safety officer at Central Oregon Community College. His wife, Isabel Pan Lara, a Bend police officer, had reported her husband's suspicious behavior, ultimately playing a pivotal role in bringing him to justice. Despite his confession, Lara initially pleaded not guilty, and prosecutors announced their intention to seek the death penalty. His attorneys argued that his rights had been violated during the interrogation, claiming he had been denied the opportunity to make phone calls while in custody in a stunning pre-trial ruling. A judge dismissed his detailed confession, leaving the prosecution to rely heavily on forensic evidence, a major setback for the case. Lara's defense described his crime spree as an enigma, attributing it to a genetic degenerative cognitive condition, while the prosecution maintained that he was a potential serial killer and psychopath. Over a year and a half after Kay's murder, Lara eventually changed his plea to guilty in January 2018 to avoid a potential death sentence. He pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and robbery, although evidence suggested sexual assault had occurred. Prosecutors chose not to pursue those charges, focusing instead on securing a life sentence. Kay's family reluctantly agreed, prioritizing justice over additional convictions. During the proceedings, Kay's mother publicly called Lara a monster. The court later sentenced him to life without parole for Kay's murder, and a second life sentence for the kidnapping of Andrea, the young woman he had held hostage during his crime spree. Lara addressed the court with a brief, emotional plea for forgiveness, acknowledging the pain he caused, but offering no true absolution. Judge Michael Adler described Lara's actions as cold-hearted beyond belief, and noted he was fortunate that the jury was not assigning a death sentence. The judge also praised Andrea for her courage and recognized the difficulty of the letters he had received from Kay's family. He expressed deep sympathy, telling the family, "I wish I could change things, I can't." In the aftermath, Isabel Pan Lara filed for divorce and resigned from her police position, citing the emotional toll of her husband's crimes. Kay's family pursued a lawsuit against Central Oregon Community College, claiming the institution had failed to conduct proper background checks and ignored warning signs about Lara's behavior. Reports indicated that other officers had been uneasy around him, and the lawsuit highlighted concerns over the campus safety, uniforms and vehicles, which closely resembled official police equipment, creating opportunities for abuse of authority. Ultimately, the family sought accountability not only from the perpetrator but also from the institution that had allowed someone like Lara to wield trust and power. A tragic case that left a lasting mark on the Bend community. The Sawyers eventually reached a $2 million settlement with Central Oregon Community College, but tragedy struck again in 2022 when Julie's storage unit was broken into during a drug-fueled crime spree. Over the course of a year, John Vieira and Emily Pickett stole from numerous victims, including Julie and her husband, taking $30,000 worth of belongings, among them a small necklace containing Kay's ashes. Vieira later admitted to discarding the necklace in a bin, and it has never been recovered. He pleaded guilty to 16 property crimes and was sentenced to 40 months in prison, while Pickett received 10 days. Kay's legacy endures through Kay's law. Passed in 2019, the legislation ensures campus security officers and their vehicles are clearly distinguishable from official law enforcement. Campus vehicles can no longer have rooftop lights or interior dividers, must include GPS and interior video recording, and officers are prohibited from conducting vehicle stops or frisks. National background checks and psychological testing are now required for all campus security hires. In addition, Kay's family launched K Readers, named after Kay's childhood nickname, which donates copies of Oh, the Places You'll Go to preschool and Head Start classrooms across Central Oregon. This was Kay's favorite childhood book and inspired her love for writing and poetry. Reflecting on her daughter, Julie said, "The moment I held her, I understood what love at first Sight meant she will continue to live on in all the memories we share. She had an amazing 23 years, and I want that to be remembered. Story 4's evening fell over one of London's most glamorous department stores. Gunshots suddenly rang out. Shoppers scrambled for cover, fearing a robbery or terrorist attack, but this horrifying moment was the tragic conclusion to a disturbing chain of events. 22-year-old Claire Byrne, originally from Groombridge in Kent, had grown up attending St. Gregory's Catholic Comprehensive School in Tunbridge Wells, before continuing her education at West Kent College. Earning a BTC National Diploma, Claire was shy, gentle, and thoughtful. Never speaking ill of anyone, she pursued her passion for beauty and makeup, taking several consultancy courses and doing theater makeup at Shepperton Studios. Her hard work paid off when she landed her dream job as a beauty consultant at Harvey Nichols in Knightsbridge, London's flagship luxury department store determined to impress. During her interview, Claire had written pages of notes and approached the opportunity with focus and professionalism. She quickly became popular with colleagues, known for her warmth, quiet demeanor, and well-spoken nature. Moving to southeast London, Claire shared a flat with 2 colleagues and embraced city life, thriving in her new independence and opportunities while working at Harvey Nichols. Claire met 30-year-old Michael Pesh, one of the store's security guards. They began talking and soon went on a few dates. In January 2005, Michael, a dual citizen of the Czech Republic and Slovakia, had previously served as a soldier in Slovakia, but faced prosecution for desertion after working as a security guard at the U.S. Embassy in Bratislava. He relocated to the UK and took a security position at Harvey Nichols. Claire's mother, Tricia, later reflected that Michael was much older and going through a divorce situation she found far from ideal for her young daughter. Claire, however, had not fallen in love with him. She was simply flattered by the attention he lavished on her. Michael Pesh showered Claire with affection and quickly told her he loved her after only 3 dates. Claire's cousin, Christian, recalled that alarm bells immediately went off after their first date. Claire confided in her mother that she felt uncomfortable. Michael wanted to be with her constantly, didn't like her seeing friends, and disapproved of her going home. She felt suffocated and told her mother, "It's all happening much too quickly." Things worsened when Michael returned from a trip to Slovakia. He demanded Claire meet him at the airport, insisting she help carry his suitcase. He also wanted to stay at her flat, a prospect that made her uneasy, given their short time together. When Claire asked him to leave, he refused after a tense standoff. She persuaded him to walk to the train station, but he still wouldn't board a train. Claire had had enough and told him the relationship was over, but he refused to accept it. Michael called her 20 times, and when she didn't answer, he waited outside her flat for 2 hours, shouting at her flatmate and insisting he needed to speak to Claire. The following day, he followed her home with a large bouquet of flowers. Claire repeated that it was over, leaving the flowers on her doorstep, where they remained all week. This marked the beginning of a terrifying campaign of harassment. Michael's incessant calls and texts continued, sometimes as many as 50 per day. One read, "We are meant to be together." Claire would change her phone number, but he always tracked her down. Starting the cycle again, his delusions were clear. One message read, "It's our anniversary. Tomorrow, how should we spend it?" He would watch her at work, using mirrors and reflections in the store, and pressured colleagues to force Claire to speak to him. On one occasion, Claire confronted him, asking him to stop, but he refused to listen. One day, as she left work, he followed her in his security uniform, grabbing her and insisting, "I love you, and I know you love me too." Claire tried to reason with him, insisting she did not love him. His response was aggressive. "Yes, you do, you stupid little girl." Michael's messages grew darker. One read, "If I can't have you, then no one will." Over months, those around Claire became aware of his stalking. Colleagues noted it openly, and Claire's professional life suffered as she struggled to concentrate and occasionally arrived late to work. In March 2005, Claire encountered Michael at the underground station. Desperate, she ran and jumped onto a train, but he followed, sitting opposite her at the next stop. She tried to escape, but he pushed her. She managed to board another train, with him in pursuit. Terrified, she warned him she would report him if he didn't leave her alone. He threatened, "If you report me, I will kill you," when she insisted all she wanted was for him to leave her alone. He smiled, stroked her face, and attempted to kiss her. Claire pushed him away, and he finally got off at the next stop, Chicon. Claire called her mother in tears. Her family was devastated to see her subjected to such relentless harassment. Her cousin later said, "Just by looking at him, I didn't get a good feeling. He's completely unhinged." Claire's cousin described Michael as dangerous, unstable, and obsessively fixated on her, unable to endure the harassment any longer. Claire informed her supervisors at Harvey Nichols about what had been happening. The head of security, a former police officer, took her concerns seriously. He reviewed security footage and quickly confirmed that Pesh was stalking and harassing Claire. He also spoke with staff members and compiled a detailed file of complaints, though Pesh was moved to a different floor and assigned a new rota. He continued to show up at Claire's department. Eventually, he was suspended. The head of security encouraged Claire to report him to the police initially. She hesitated, both because of Pesh's threats to kill her if she went to the authorities, and because she felt embarrassed about the situation. The breaking point came when it emerged that Pesh had asked another staff member, who was training to be a lawyer, if someone committed a murder, what would the sentence be? Claire then contacted the police. Pesh was called into work, where officers arrested him on the spot, and he was immediately dismissed from his position when Claire saw him being led away. She told her mother he looked angry despite everything. Claire felt conflicted. She didn't want him to get into trouble. She just wanted him to stop. During his police interview, Pesh presented a completely different version of events. He claimed he had ended the relationship and that Claire had said she loved him. He said he regretted the breakup and couldn't understand why she didn't want to continue the relationship. He admitted to some actions, but denied making any threats to kill her, insisting he only wanted to see if she wanted to reconcile. The police took Claire's statement, but did not interview her colleagues or flatmates who had witnessed his stalking. No formal risk assessment was carried out, and aside from Claire's testimony, there was no evidence of threats. Pesh was later released on bail under a non-molestation order, which prohibited him from contacting Claire or visiting the store. However, just 2 days later, he returned to her doorstep, waving through the window. Claire called the police, but by the time they arrived, he had vanished. Hoping to escape him, Claire and her flatmates moved to a new location, but within days, on April 10th, Pesh had tracked them down. Claire alerted the police again. They arrived, but he had already fled. She then joined the officers in a patrol car to search for him, and when they finally located him, he cooperated, even holding out his wrists for handcuffs while smiling at Claire. He was arrested for breaching bail conditions and charged under Section 2 of the Protection from Harassment Act of 1997. Claire's mother, Tricia, recalled that police told Claire Pesh had not meant his threats seriously, attributing it to a language barrier and emotional distress. He was taken to Bon Marche prison for 8 days and then released on bail, with court proceedings scheduled for August 31st, under the condition that he avoided Claire and Knightsbridge while awaiting trial. Claire and her mother went on a 5-day birthday trip to Florence, Italy. Tricia described the holiday as pure gold, a rare chance for Claire to relax after months of fear and stress. Meanwhile, Michael Pesh returned to Slovakia, where he trained at a firing range, passed his firearms exam on June 14th, obtained a firearms license a month later, and purchased a registered handgun on July 20th. He returned to the United Kingdom, smuggling the handgun in his luggage via coach and ferry. As the trial approached, Claire prepared to give evidence, but on August 31st, at Tower Bridge Magistrates Court, Michael Pesh unexpectedly changed his plea to guilty. There would be no trial, and Claire would not have to face him in court. He was subsequently released on bail. Claire felt a sense of relief. believing that her ordeal was finally over and that she could move on with her life by September 13, 2005. Claire had not seen Pesh since the court proceedings, and her life seemed to be returning to normal as her workday neared its end. She served customers on the shop floor. With only 10 minutes remaining in her shift, a colleague gestured to her watch, signaling the approaching end of the day. Claire smiled in response. Suddenly, a shadow appeared behind her, initially mistaken for a visitor. The figure raised a gun and shot Claire in the back of the head. She fell to the floor as he fired 3 more shots at her face. Panic erupted in the store as customers scrambled for cover, and the gunman fired once into the ceiling. He then turned the weapon on himself. Taking his own life, Michael Pesh had carried out his terrifying threat. 2 people were confirmed dead at the exclusive Harvey Nichols department store in London. Detectives reported no other suspects in connection with the shooting. Claire's mother, Tricia, had been out celebrating a friend's birthday. Returning home around midnight, she was met by police officers who delivered the devastating news of her daughter's death instantly. Tricia knew who was responsible. Claire's colleagues were left devastated. Many offered counseling to cope with the trauma. Investigators later discovered a 40-page notebook in Pesh's flat, detailing his thoughts on life, references to ghosts and prophets, and Claire's address. He had also written poetry. Reports revealed that he had gained entry to Harvey Nichols through a back door, despite being ordered to stay away, and that he had taken cocaine. The case prompted outrage from domestic violence campaigners, questioning why Pesh had been allowed bail despite his threats. A representative from Refuge stated, "Yet again, women who are stalked and threatened by their partners have been let down by the criminal justice system. How many more murders must occur before women get the protection they deserve?" Claire's funeral in Tunbridge Wells saw hundreds gather to pay their respects. An inquest into her death revealed significant procedural errors. The Westminster coroner, Dr. Paul Knapman, noted that no risk assessment had been conducted when Claire first reported Pesh, that she was not informed of his charges and custody status, and that a standard police form meant to gauge threat levels had not been completed. While the coroner concluded in 2007 that Claire's murder could not have been reasonably foreseen, he criticized police for mishandling procedural requirements, determined that her daughter's death would not be in vain. Tricia Burnell dedicated herself to legal reform, campaigning to make stalking a criminal offense in its own right. She joined forces with other affected families to advocate for stronger protections for potential victims, teaming up with Carol Farrakay and Stella Moore. Tricia Burnell became a leading voice in the fight against stalking and domestic violence. Carol's daughter had been stabbed to death after being stalked, while Stella's daughter had been shot under similar circumstances. Together, the 3 women championed a pioneering project, the Family Justice Center. The first of its kind in Europe, the Family Justice Center immediately classifies all domestic violence and stalking victims as high risk. Even before a full assessment is conducted, it collaborates with multiple agencies and charities, including police and investigative teams, ensuring victims are connected with the right support services. Tricia, Stella, and Carol were present in January 2008 when the Home Affairs Select Committee visited the center. They also helped establish a dedicated helpline for stalking victims, providing guidance and advocacy. Tricia emphasized the importance of a approach. Every county should have a stalking service. We need to protect victims, but we also need to address the offender. Simply imprisoning them isn't enough. Once they're released, they either resume targeting the same victim or move on to another. Locking them up alone won't prevent future tragedies. She recalled the heartbreak of Claire Burnell's murder, 6 years after he had been charged with harassment, yet released on bail. Claire was 21 when she was stalked. She had no idea of the danger she was in. Her killer planned her death while away from the country, under the same bail conditions. The signs were there. Claire didn't understand them. Her friends didn't, and the professionals didn't either. Today, more victims are reporting stalking. They are no longer embarrassed or ashamed. The message is finally being heard. Their advocacy bore fruit. In 2012, new legislation was passed making stalking a criminal offense. Trisha's tireless campaigning was recognized in 2021 when she was awarded an MBE, honoring her work as a victim's advocate. Trisha remarked, "Claire Bernal was a young woman taken in the prime of her life. The impact of her death has been profound, driving essential changes in the law through this advocacy." Claire's memory continues to live on. Story 5. The Hollywood Ripper. California needs little introduction. A state of almost 40 million residents, famed for glitz, glamour, golden beaches, Silicon Valley, and Hollywood elites, yet beneath its dazzling surface lies a darker undercurrent. Today's story explores a series of horrific crimes spanning nearly 2 decades, culminating in 2021, the story of the Hollywood Ripper. The story begins in 2001 in Los Angeles, California. One resident was 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin, a determined fashion student navigating the bustling city. Ashley was ambitious, fearless, and career-driven. After gaining a place at the Los Angeles Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, she supplemented her studies with extra classes at UCLA while working part-time as a dancer in Las Vegas. Ashley's days were long and grueling, but she was carving out her own path in a competitive industry. She shared a charming bungalow with friends on a quiet street, conveniently close to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her professional and social circles were thriving, with opportunities arising from her fashion work. Ashley Ellerin's talent and charisma soon caught the attention of Hollywood's rising stars. She briefly dated Vin Diesel and was also linked romantically to Jeremy Sisto of Law and Order, who even flew her out to one of his film sets by December 2000. She had begun seeing a young actor whose career was rapidly taking off. 23-year-old Ashton Kutcher at the time. He was starring in the hit TV show, That 70s Show, and had just wrapped filming Dude, Where's My Car? Ashley and Ashton met through mutual friends and quickly hit it off in February 21, 2001, the night of the Grammys. Ashton was attending an after-party at a friend's house. He and Ashley spoke on the phone and agreed to meet afterward at her bungalow for drinks and dinner earlier in the day. Ashley had spent time with her visiting father, and later her landlord, Mark, stopped by. It would later emerge that Ashley and Mark had a previous on-and-off relationship, which included spending the night together that evening around 8:30 p.m. Ashton called Ashley to confirm their plans, but mentioned he was running late and suggested they skip dinner and just have drinks. Ashley, finishing her shower, agreed at approximately 10:15 p.m. Ashton tried calling her again, but she didn't answer. Concerned, he went to her bungalow. The lights were on, and her car was outside. After knocking multiple times with no response, he peeked through a side window inside. The bungalow appeared messy, though Ashley had warned him she was in the middle of remodeling. Ashton noticed red on the floor, but assumed it was spilled wine and, thinking Ashley was simply upset at his lateness, left the following morning. Ashley's roommate discovered a horrifying scene. Ashley lay on the floor outside her bedroom, surrounded by a pool of blood. She had been stabbed 47 times, some wounds nearly 6 inches deep, and her head was almost severed. It was clear she had been dead for hours. The quiet community was left in shock. Her family and friends gave police every contact and piece of information they could, but Ashley's busy social life meant investigators had an extensive list of names to check. Neighbors recalled hearing shouting shortly after 8:30 p.m., which they dismissed as a party, but saw no one entering or leaving. There were no signs of forced entry, indicating Ashley had likely opened the door for her killer, suggesting she may have known them. Among the names friends provided was Mike the Furnace Man, a man Ashley had complained about repeatedly. Friends described him as creepy, often showing up uninvited. After months of investigation, the Los Angeles Police Department focused on Michael Gargiulo. In a surprising turn, they received a call from the Cook County Sheriff's Office in Illinois, which had reopened a 1993 cold case, the murder of 18-year-old Trisha Pacazio. They were looking for someone in Los Angeles who might be connected and the name that came up was none other than Michael Gargiulo. LAPD officers realized the connection could not be a coincidence. Trisha Pacasio had been brutally stabbed nearly 50 times on the front steps of her family home on the night of Friday, August 13th. She had met friends for dinner at TGI Fridays, one of their last nights together before heading off to different universities. They stayed out until around 1 a.m., after which Trisha drove home alone. Just a few hours later, her father, Rick, discovered her lifeless body while stepping out to walk the dog. The first thing he saw were her small tennis shoes, and then he collapsed to his knees, screaming in horror. She was covered in wounds, one arm broken, and still clutching her house key. Trisha had been viciously attacked near her front door just days before she was set to start college. DNA found under her fingernails suggested she had fought her killer, but at the time, forensic technology was too limited for the samples to yield results. Her parents described Trisha as a dream child, an exemplary student, debate champion, and one of the kindest and hardest working people. They knew she had been accepted to study engineering at Purdue University, fully prepared to take on life's challenges. Her murder shocked everyone. There were no suspects, and the case eventually went cold. Her mother, Diane, recalled being told by police that some cases simply weren't solved, leaving the family to fight for answers for 7 long years. The case was only reopened once forensic testing had advanced enough to provide new leads. The Cook County Sheriff's Office requested DNA samples from everyone in Trisha's circle. At the time, Michael Gargiulo had been on investigators' radar from the start. He had driven Trisha to a friend's house just 2 days prior to her murder, was close to her brother Doug, and was a familiar face at the Pacasio home. Questioned in 1993, he faced no charges at the time. Nearly a decade later, as the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Trisha were compared, the similarities between the two killings became impossible to ignore. Los Angeles investigators now urgently sought Michael after months of surveillance. They finally located him. When asked for a DNA sample, he refused, insisting he had no involvement and would not comply without a warrant. Investigators bided their time and eventually obtained a DNA sample while he was briefly hospitalized. The results confirmed their suspicions. Michael Gargiulo's DNA matched the sample collected from under Trisha's fingernails years earlier. Investigators rushed to the attorney's office seeking an indictment, only to face rejection. Officials argued the DNA could have been transferred casually, given Michael's friendship with Trisha and her brother. Witness accounts, however, indicated that Trisha had spent the night with several people, yet the only DNA present belonged to Michael. Another setback came when the LAPD revealed they had no physical evidence linking him to Ashley Ellerin's murder. Investigators were on the brink of catching a dangerous killer, only to have him slip away once again. Determined, they began meticulously reviewing his history, character, prior relationships, and previous criminal behavior. Michael Thomas Gargiulo, born in 1976, grew up in the quiet suburb of Glenview, Illinois, in a large family with 7 siblings. He later claimed to have endured physical abuse from his father and siblings, though these allegations were never verified. As a teenager, Michael developed a reputation for bullying, quick temper, and compulsive lying, often exaggerating events to suit his narrative. One of his friends, those who knew Michael, recalled that he could shift from being perfectly charming to almost inhuman in an instant. As a teenager, he was repeatedly arrested for petty crimes like breaking into unlocked cars and getting into fights. Around this time, he developed a deep fascination with serial killer Ted Bundy, immersing himself in books on forensic science and taking pride in his extensive knowledge. He would tell people that if he were ever caught committing a crime, he either knew how to evade capture or would lie until his dying day. After Trisha Pacasio's murder in 1993, Michael began sending her family strange gifts: a t-shirt for her father Rick, a restaurant voucher, and flowers for her mother Diane. On one occasion, he even showed up at their home asking to speak with Rick. He waited for nearly an hour before abruptly leaving without saying a word. leaving the family on edge. Although the police were notified, no further action was taken. In 1997, when Michael was charged with stealing a car, police attempted to leverage the situation to get him to speak about Trisha's murder. Offering a potential deal, he remained silent. Former girlfriends also recounted horrifying experiences with him. One claimed he had handcuffed and raped her at age 17, while another described being punched so hard that she suffered a detached retina. He threatened to kill her, boasting that his knowledge of forensics would allow him to get away. With IT in 1998, Michael moved to Los Angeles to pursue a dream many share, becoming an actor and model. He quickly landed a job as a bouncer at the Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset Boulevard, West Hollywood, but was soon fired for punching a customer during this time. He befriended two fellow bouncers, and in conversation, admitted to killing Trisha Pacasio in 1993, casually describing how he left her body on the steps, given his reputation for lying. The men dismissed this as another of his tall tales. In the fall of 2000, Michael met Ashley Ellerin, who lived across the street from him. He offered to help her change a flat tire, and they exchanged numbers. This brief encounter would ignite a fatal obsession. Michael began showing up uninvited, sitting outside her home at all hours, and appearing wherever she went, despite DNA evidence linking him to both Trisha and Ashley. Years passed without charges. By 2005, police still had a single suspect, but lacked enough evidence to prosecute them. Another chilling crime occurred in East Los Angeles. Maria Bruno, a 32-year-old mother of four, had recently moved into a new apartment complex. Following a separation from her husband, she had carefully chosen the building for its security and safety for her young children, which included 2-year-old twins and a 4- and 5-year-old. Only 10 days after moving in, on December 1, 2005, Maria was found dead by her ex-husband, Irving. Her body had been brutally mutilated, stabbed 17 times, her throat slit, and both breasts cut off. The only clue at the scene was a blue surgical shoe cover, stained with a small amount of her blood. Investigators determined the killer had entered through the kitchen window around 1 a.m. and had used one of Maria's own knives. Forensic analysis suggested the assailant was left-handed initially. Suspicion fell on Irving due to their turbulent relationship, but he insisted they were attempting to reconcile and had even been out to dinner together the night before. Investigators also noted a few drops of Maria's blood outside the immediate crime scene, hinting at the killer's movements during the attack. Investigators initially considered Irving Maria Bruno's ex-husband, but he quickly provided a plausible explanation for the small drops of blood found in his car. Maria had accidentally cut her finger while at a restaurant, and staff had helped her, corroborating his story. Once he was ruled out, police were left with little to go on. One detective admitted it felt as though Maria might have been killed randomly, with no leads apart from the hope that more DNA evidence might be found on the surgical shoe cover. Meanwhile, several neighbors had noticed a man living across the courtyard acting oddly in the days leading up to Maria's murder. His behavior had become even stranger. They provided police with a description and a sketch. The man they described was Michael Garullo. By the time investigators began looking, he had long since disappeared, leaving another unsolved murder on the books. Around the same time, Trisha Pacasio's parents in Illinois finally learned that their daughter's DNA sample had matched an active investigation. They were shocked and frustrated that it had taken so long and that Michael remained free without facing charges. 3 more years passed, bringing the story to 2008 in Santa Monica. 26-year-old Michelle Murphy lived in an apartment complex. One late night in April, she awoke to a masked intruder in her bedroom. Wearing a hoodie and a hat, the man immediately attacked her with a knife. Petite, at just 5 on, Michelle fought desperately, grabbing the blade and trying to wrestle it away. She screamed for help and, in a last-ditch effort, tucked her knees toward her chest and pushed the man with her legs, causing him to fall off the bed. Her attacker fled, muttering, "I'm sorry." Michelle was left battered and bleeding, but alive. She called her boyfriend, who immediately called for help. Forensic Investigators noted that the attacker was left-handed and had been cut during the struggle, leaving a blood sample behind when the Santa Monica Police Department ran it through the DNA database. It matched the sample taken from under Trisha Pacazio's fingernails. It also matched DNA found on the elastic of the blue surgical shoe cover. Outside Maria Bruno's apartment, Michael Garullo's horrifying spree was still ongoing, but finally, after 15 years, it was about to end in June 2008. Michael was arrested for the attempted murder of Michelle Murphy and held on $11 million bail. A search of his car uncovered critical evidence, including blue surgical shoe covers 3 months later. He was also charged with the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. It wasn't until 2011 that he was finally charged with Trisha Pacazio's murder, because Trisha's case was in Illinois, and the other victims were in California. Michael faced 2 separate trials in different states. Michael pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense team claimed he suffered from mental health issues and could not recall attacking Michelle, meaning the jury would have to determine whether he was sane at the time, a decision that would greatly affect sentencing. After many delays caused by Michael hiring and firing lawyers and attempting escapes, his California trial began in May 2019, the longest wait for a trial in LA County Jail history. During the sanity phase of the trial, the jury concluded that Michael Garullo was indeed sane when he murdered 2 women and attempted to kill a third. This decision cleared the way for prosecutors to pursue the death penalty, or life without parole. Michael Garullo was ultimately found guilty. Comments he had made after his arrest led investigators to believe he might have been responsible for as many as 10 murders in Los Angeles. He faced charges for 2 murders and 1 attempted murder, with opening statements for the trial set to begin the following day. The case highlighted the methodical and calculated nature of Garullo's crimes. For nearly 15 years, he had been stalking women, meticulously planning the perfect moment to attack them with a knife near their homes from the start. The prosecution presented Garullo as a seemingly ordinary suburban Chicago kid, a husband and a father, but beneath that facade, he had been leading a secret, dangerous double life. When the prosecution laid out its evidence, they emphasized that despite 36,000 pages of materials and hundreds of witnesses, no physical evidence directly linked him to Ashley Ellerin's death. The trial included testimony from numerous witnesses, including Michelle Murphy and Ashton Kutcher. Garullo arrived in court that morning in a blue suit. Appearing visibly nervous, he spoke for only about 20 minutes. But his testimony was a critical part of the proceedings. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Garullo's behavior, his obsession with the victims, patterns in his relationships, his left-handedness, DNA evidence, and his proximity to the victims' homes to help the jury understand the spatial dynamics. They were taken to visit the crime scenes. White vans transported the jurors to Michelle Murphy's apartment and Ashley Ellerin's Hollywood bungalow. Prosecutors highlighted that Garullo lived near Ellerin's home, met her only briefly when changing a flat tire, and then allegedly began stalking and ultimately murdering her. The defense, however, sought to challenge the case by emphasizing the lack of direct evidence in Ashley Ellerin's home. There were no witnesses or DNA linking Garullo to the crime, making the case largely circumstantial. The defense even raised questions about Ashley's landlord, Mark, suggesting that he could have been present and involved. They noted that when Ashton Kutcher called Ashley that evening, she was just stepping out of the shower, and Mark had admitted to being there, potentially placing him at the scene. The defense also argued that DNA found near Maria Bruno's home could be explained by Garullo's work as a repairman at the complex, claiming he may have innocently come into contact with the evidence. They suggested Maria's ex-husband and their turbulent marriage could be considered as alternative explanations. Prosecutors dismissed these claims as desperate attempts to deflect blame onto innocent people who had already been cleared years earlier. They argued that Garullo's obsession with Ashley Ellerin made it highly likely he had been watching her bungalow that evening when Mark left. Garullo allegedly seized the opportunity Entering Ashley's home within seconds, she may have opened the door, expecting Mark, still in her robe, after the shower. Only to encounter her attacker, prosecutors applied the same reasoning to Maria, Bruno's murder, and noted the DNA evidence in Michelle Murphy's case, further solidified their claims. The trial was grueling. Even for seasoned reporters, accustomed to covering violent crimes, the graphic and disturbing nature of the evidence made it difficult to follow at times, after weeks of testimony and presentations. The case was left in the hands of the jury. Breaking news announced that the moment of truth had arrived, as the jury would now decide Michael Garullo's fate this morning. In the trial of the notorious Hollywood Ripper, Michael Garullo was found guilty on all counts, including the brutal murders of 2 women in Los Angeles County and the attempted murder of a third despite his defense team's arguments. The jury unanimously held him responsible in late 2019. They also concluded that the only appropriate sentence was death. Their recommendation was upheld. And in 2021, 45-year-old Michael Garullo was officially sentenced to death for the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. Before the sentence was handed down, the court heard deeply moving statements from the victims' families. Michelle Murphy, the lone survivor of Garullo's attacks, and Ashley Ellerin's father, recounted how one man had destroyed so many lives. Though sentenced to death, Garullo is unlikely to face execution soon, as California has not carried out any executions since 2006, and Governor Gavin Newsom has suspended them for the duration of his term. Nonetheless, courts have been proceeding under the assumption that executions may eventually resume. Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Larry Paul Fedler described the devastation left in Garullo's wake, saying, "Everywhere that Mr. Garullo went, death and destruction followed." Powerful victim impact statements were given by Ashley's parents, Maria's ex-husband Irving, and Trisha Pacazio's family, among others, describing how one person's actions had irreversibly shattered multiple lives. Families recounted the unimaginable grief of parenting children whose mothers had been violently taken from them, struggling to explain such horrors while protecting their little ones from the grisly reality in court. Garullo expressed his grievance over being denied the right to testify on his own behalf, claiming, "I'm being sent to death row wrongfully. I've been framed by tunnel vision detectives. I feel the court and defense counsel violated my fundamental choice by preventing me from testifying." Garullo now faces extradition to Illinois to stand trial for Trisha Pacazio's murder. Though no date has yet been set, law enforcement officers involved in the case acknowledge that there may be additional victims. As Garullo himself has alluded to committing as many as 10 murders, investigators continue to follow leads and tips, hoping that more pieces of the puzzle will eventually surface. Many admit, however, that mistakes were made along the way. One detective candidly stated, "I can't put a happy face on this, because we dropped the ball. Plain and simple. If earlier evidence had been pursued, some of these girls might still be alive." For the families and friends of Trisha, Ashley, and Maria, the horror of their deaths continues to haunt them. These vibrant, ambitious young women had their lives brutally cut short, leaving behind a void that can never be filled. Michelle Murphy, who survived, shared that she lives in constant fear, dreading both sleep and waking. A stark reminder of the trauma Garullo inflicted. The enormity of Michael Garullo's crimes is almost unimaginable. The lengths he went to, the planning and obsession, show a man with no limits or conscience. It is terrifying to consider what might have happened had he not been apprehended, and how many more lives he might have claimed. As the rain falls gently and the night deepens, we are reminded of life's fragility and the importance of remaining vigilant, even as we seek comfort in quiet moments. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful rest until we meet again. Stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.